Welcome to episode 15 of the Ape and Bird NFT show, here with Steve and Greg. Steve, another week in NFT land. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you first? And then what are we going to be outraged by this week?
I am doing pretty well. I feel like it's been a good day today. We're recording on Thursday. There's been a lot happening, both locally and internationally. We saw sort of AFL Mint sell out. So we'll talk a little bit about the AFL's first foray into the world of NFTs shortly. There was a little bit of, I would suggest, a course correct from the Proof ecosystem and Moonbirds after a few weeks of pretty heavy FUD. We spoke about the CCO drama last week, Steve. But overall, even though volumes are quite low, I'm feeling relatively bullish on this particular Thursday. So ready for a big show.
Oh, really? I'm the opposite. I think we're going down even further.
Well,
what is it, an old Coles ad? Prices are down.
Yeah, well, floors are certainly not holding up, but in terms of sentiment, or at least content that I'm consuming the last few days, I think there's a few reasons to have a little bit of a smile on the face.
Yeah, well, the big one this week, we'll start at the top: Sudoswap and Royalties. Explain everything that's happening there, and we'll have a chat about that.
Yeah, so from my understanding on this Sudoswap, we're obviously, all of us that have been in the NFT space for a while are very accustomed to OpenSea's standard 2.5% commission on any sale, essentially, which is a fair chunk. It's a big whack.
Yeah, very big.
So Sudoswap, and you might need to provide a little bit more outline on the liquidity pools here, Steve, but I believe that, it's going down to 0.5% if you're using Sudoswap's platform. I did watch a YouTube video on it the other day, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to best describe these liquidity pools to our audience. Have you got any?
Nor can I, probably, but I'll do my best. So in the case of these Sudoswap liquidity pools, you pretty much put in all these floor, or they don't have to be floor, NFTs into one big pool. So I'm sure when we started with NFTs, the actual Bored Ape, there was a pool where you could put in any Bored Ape that you owned and take out. Well, first you would get credits. So you might put in a floor Bored Ape, you'll get 100 ape credits. And then at any time you could come back, have a look at what was in that pool, give your 100 credits and take out another Bored Ape. So these sort of liquidity pools are really used for the floor type ones. And I'm assuming this is going to be very similar with Sudoswap. But again, I did go to the website and I saw different prices. So this might not be the way, but it's just a big pool of NFTs from one project, and then you can come and it allows you to put your NFT in, and I think quickly take out liquidity. So there is already money for items that you can put into that pool, take money out, and then also ones that are up for sale on the other end. So both ends. But yeah, I have not looked into it deep enough, but the big thing with it is, yes, the 0.5% royalty for Sudoswap. And we know that eventually all these other platforms are going to have to come down to at least 1%. I think Coinbase is fairly low. I can't even remember. No one even uses Coinbase. LooksRare has maybe 2%, but then you get Looks token back, XYZ2. I don't know what that platform is. So they will eventually all compete on a price. But at the moment, OpenSea doing 80-90% of volume has no need to compete on price because they've got everyone there and they have the liquidity there. But yeah, the big story is that Sudoswap is not putting the royalties on there as well. So let's say you had a 10 ETH sale on OpenSea and the royalty was 5% plus OpenSea's 2.5%. In comparison, if you sell that same one on Sudoswap, you're saving half an ETH in the royalty alone, which is huge for most people, plus another 2% on the OpenSea royalty. So And on much bigger items, or if you're a trader, it makes a massive difference to your bottom line.
100%, and that really has been the big controversy. It hasn't necessarily been all the nuances of what the Sudoswap platform is proposing to do, but it's actually been on sort of, we all got pulled into this world of NFTs, and one of the big hooks was, particularly for artists and secondary sales, was royalties in perpetuity. We always hear the story of a traditional artist sells the painting first and foremost. They get that upfront sale. If that painting is then sold another 15, 20, 50, 100 times over and over again on the secondary market, the artist sees none of those royalties. So, NFTs came along, and, we saw artists flock to the space. And, I've seen a lot of Twitter threads and a lot of people that, I respect sort of as digital artists and traditional artists that have made their way into the world of Web3 and NFTs be really upset by this proposition. I know, Steve, from your perspective as a project founder, you're angling your project NFTs as more of a business. I know you had a tweet thread around that earlier this week. So before we sort of get into the artist gripes, can you tell us, from your perspective as a project founder and what you're building, how your response is to this particular situation?
Yeah, so NFTs is a 10K project, and from the start, I've never tried to hype it, so I knew our turnover wouldn't be huge. So we've done about 1,000 ETH in turnover. We've got a 5% royalty. And from the start, I said all the money that gets raised, half of it went straight to the community fund, the other half went to the business fund. I then said that any royalties would be mine and Matt's pay. Now, I assumed this was during their heady days of being able to sell out a project. I did assume we might get at least 1,000 or 2,000 ETH in turnover fairly quickly. That hasn't been the case. So we've made 50 ETH, which maybe 120,000 Aussie dollars. Now, Matt alone, if he was to work for an employee, would be 250K plus. I'm worth at least $30 in total. But that was the initial idea. So it makes it difficult. And from a business perspective, if you're trying to run it on royalties, it's never going to work, because you get this, unless you're a blue chip, but you get this initial spike in sales. So pretty much, I would say most projects, 80% of their turnover is in the first month of releasing. And then it's just a slow, steady decline of sales until you announce something or launch something. But I've really lost my train of thought there. But it's just that from the way I saw it, I would need to build a business around this product to bring in enough money to keep it running. I thought we have the initial mint, which is going to give us maybe $1 million after everything's said and done to build. But then we needed to bring in a lot more money without going back to the community all the time. And in saying that, we will have another drop with the players. But my idea was, because we're doing a sports-based one, we're going to have sponsors on the jerseys. And I've only talked to a few companies, but we've already made $50,000 from that. Tournament sponsors, merch is another one. At the moment, we're losing money on that because we just want as many people wearing NFTs gear as possible. So it's a loss leader for now. But once we get everything right and build up the community enough, we can flip the switch, raise prices 10, 20%, and that can start being another profit center. So it's really a case of being able to build a business around the product, and you get that initial cash flow to figure things out and get there. And that's the issue with any startup. You get some initial funding, and your job is to either get to a point where you can get more funding and then get to the next point to get more funding, or find a sustainable business model. So that's what I've been trying to do over the past, 8-9 months.
Yeah, I think that's really good insight. And obviously, even some of the bigger projects, when secondary sales dry up, I mean, I've heard this for, whether it's the Cool Cats of the world or World of Women, what are these sort of mid to higher tier collections going to do? Is it more VC funding, et cetera, et cetera? I think from an artist perspective, I certainly understand the gripe. I think that was the allure to come into the space, the NFT space in the beginning, was this whole royalties in perpetuity. But you and I were chatting briefly off air before this, and it seems like it's a solvable problem. And I don't think either of us proclaim to be a whiz-bang Solidity dev, but to me, one of the one of the options would be to bake in the royalty into the smart contract level rather than at a marketplace level, so that can't be sort of shoehorned around. But from my understanding too, logically you've got the issue at the moment of, if I buy a piece of art or a PFP collection and I mint it in one wallet and then I send it to another wallet and it's got a baked in, commission every time it moves wallets, then I'm sort of paying to send it to myself. But I think that you're referring to before when we were chatting that there might be a new standard that comes along, but there's also a way that you could get around that by essentially having a triggering part of the contract to say that if ETH changes hands, then that royalty, whatever that is set at, gets taken out.
Exactly. And it amuses me that we've had the artist meta for 2 years and no one up until this point has talked about, royalties aren't baked into the contract. Like, it's as if people have figured out all of a sudden, because of Sudoswap, that this was more, it does this. Actually it doesn't. We're using third parties to pay out royalties and so on. So that's amusing. But yes, there will be either a new standard that gets created, which isn't all that difficult to do, that says if there's a sale, if there's an ETH involved with the transfer or another token, then, and baked into the contract, it will say send 5% to this wallet address. So it's technically very easy to solve. And then people will come back and say, but then you can wrap the NFT, and then that takes out the contract part. And then, sure, there are always going to be ways around anything. I think people did say it pretty good. If you're an artist, you've got to want your community to actually pay you that royalty. Because at the end of the day, if someone really wanted to, yes, they can get around it. Let's say I decided to sell you a piece that was 100 ETH and the artist would normally get 5 ETH. Of course, we could do it off chain, and you could send me 100 ETH, and then I could send you the NFT. People do that all the time now, make deals, and this what normally results in lost Bored Apes or stolen Bored Apes. But it can be done. So there's always going to be a market to get around any sort of commission. But yeah, we'll be able to bake it in with a new standard. There are a few other teams trying different things. Who's the guy that wears the 3D glasses? Manifold.
Richard.
Richard. So Manifold have a royalties sort of contract where other platforms can read if you do have a royalty on your NFT project, and they will use that. But again, that's another stopgap. So I see eventually a new standard being there, but people will always try to get around it. So you as a creator just need to develop the right community that you feel are going to sort of hold themselves to the same standard you would.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think these are all solvable problems. I understand the angst from certain people, particularly in the artist community, because as I mentioned, this was such a hook to come into the NFT space, to have these royalties in perpetuity. Just on the Beeple comment, I don't disagree with it, but I also think that we as an industry should be making it as difficult as possible for people to bypass, because of the downside of bypassing, right, is obviously the security, right? Are you actually going to be trading with someone that you generally trust? If it's your best mate of 20 years and you're sending a high valuable token and you don't get the money back, there's probably going to be you know where they live, or there's probably going to be some form of resolution there. But when it's just a simple sort of like, you follow each other on Twitter, or you set up some type of chat in Discord or whatever it might be, I think the higher barriers to get around that commission, the better, because I think just just sort of saying, oh, well, we hope our community will do the right thing. I mean, particularly when we see in a bear market, right? Like, you know, all of a sudden when you're tossing around maybe some excess liquidity in a bull market, maybe you sort of feel a little bit more philanthropic and you say, sure, yeah, the artist can get their 2.5% whack. But I don't know if you asked everyone in this current climate whether they'd be so much inclined. So I do think it's important that we try to get as much right as possible in the sense of the actual infrastructure, and we only really allow the people that are going to take a huge risk of just doing something essentially on their own, just sort of having a trust factor to say, Steve, I'm going to send you this and you send me the ETH, and just hoping that comes off, because there's a huge trust factor there.
Yeah, and in saying that, so the beauty of Web3 is things are getting built every single day. So we've got a Jersey drop coming up, and I've been talking to another project creator who has pretty much created his own platform that any other NFT project can use. So we're hoping that we will be able to have our own semi-platform on nfteams.club. And then jerseys, we can set a 0% fee. That's what we're doing on our end. And then they're going to have a 0.5% fee. So this is going to match Sudoswap anyway. So the hope is we get the NFTeams community using our own platform, and then we will have our royalties on players and teams still, but at least the other thing is only 0.5%, and we can probably get that lower with volume as well. So there are a lot of things being worked on, and we'll eventually solve the problem, and fair for everybody. Like, it can be difficult. Free mints are charging 10%, so they might be the ones to die out, which can only be a good thing. But it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And yeah, you do feel for artists, but there will be solutions.
Absolutely. So should we segue into what we saw? Was it about 3 or 4 days ago? Bored Ape Yacht Club's Twitter account surpassed 1 million followers. Massive achievement, massive feat. There was the big Twitter Spaces to celebrate yesterday. Not sure if you jumped on. I was planning to put the recording on for a little bit, maybe making dinner tonight or over the weekend. But massive achievement for the apes.
Yeah, 1 million. Who knows? Again, to keep it in perspective, how many are bots? But by far, we know it's the biggest NFT project in the space. I did not listen in. I have it saved, so I might, if I find time, give it a listen. But the feedback I saw on Twitter was it was just a cool space. People telling their stories of how they got into NFTs, how thankful they were for the community that grew from there. I also saw the opposite side of people going, why didn't you pump my bags during this thing? Why wasn't a fuck it announced? Yeah. But yeah, people are always going to complain. But I think the general sentiment was fairly cool. It was just a laid back, nice $1 million member spaces. And yeah, it went pretty well.
I got to say that I think I will remember the Bored Ape Yacht Club ride, especially, last year and all the way up until sort of, essentially the other side drop this year, where we sort of started to go down the other way. But that 12 months on the Bored Ape Yacht Club roller coaster was absolutely incredible. I am no longer an ape holder, unfortunately, but I rode that wave for 13 months. And I remember going to the tennis. It was actually, I think, when you were running your NFTeams meetup this year, Steve. And I got off at Richmond Station here in Melbourne, and there was a massive murals of Bored Apes being put up. And I think, like, when you think about CryptoPunks, they're obviously historical. And this is not what I'm about to say is not saying CryptoPunks versus Bored Apes. What I'm saying is, when you and I were hearing about NFTs, I think you were just a couple of months before me in sort of late 2020, and I was coming in sort of January 2021. And, I was hearing Kevin Rose's podcast, Modern Finance. He had DC Investor on. I had heard of CryptoPunks previously, but that show in particular was the penny drop moment for me, right? Well, one of those multiple penny drop moments I had in probably a month condensed period. And the CryptoPunk story appeals to nerds like us and the people that are in the space. But Bored Ape,
Maxis as well.
ETH Maxis for sure. And I'm not downplaying CryptoPunks at all. I love punks and I'd love to own one day.
Same.
But Bored Ape put NFTs, whether you like it or not, whether you're in Camp Bored Ape or not, it put the world that we operate on or in on the map. And just between everything that they orchestrated, and whether you say, oh, you know, it's not about going on Jimmy Fallon or getting Snoop Dogg to buy one or whatever, all these things were super, super important to get the space into the ordinary person that doesn't really know about it mindset. Like around the dinner table discussion, what are these Bored Apes? And just seeing those out the front of Richmond Station, sort of taking over Richmond and walking to the tennis, I was just like, this is incredible. It was just such a rush and such a like just moment in time, that whole Bored Ape rise.
That first year, we saw culture being made in real time.
Yeah,
they are a cultural brand that was created. It was just serendipity, timing, luck, whatever you want to call it. And it just hit at a moment when, of course, crypto was going nuts. COVID was keeping people inside. Just so many different things. And for some reason, pure magic, it seems like, it just became the biggest thing. Well, maybe because we're in the NFT space, but it just seemed to be the biggest thing in the world that everyone was talking about in a social sort of setting. It was amazing to see.
100%. And, you know, I when I used to work in sport and I used to get sponsors for compression garments, right? And everyone would say, like, I'd be talking to Under Armour or 2XU and people would say, oh, you've got a skin sponsor. And it was like, no. We have 2XU as our compression garment sponsor, right? So I think the same, the reason I give that analogy is the same was happening to people that were not in the NFT Web3 space. Is
but they knew Bored Apes.
Their perception of what an NFT was, oh, that's a Bored Ape, right? So that is, again, was there luck? Was there timing? Of course. But I think anything in life is going to revolve around, especially when you get to that higher point, is going to have a portion of luck and timing to it. So, you know, I applaud the Bored Ape ecosystem. No one's ever going to get 100% of things right. This is a new space. Everyone's building in public. It's very, very difficult, but just what a ride. And I mean, it's not over yet.
I'm still on it.
Oh, I know, but I mean, just that first year out of the gates, like, it's something that I'll never forget. So
I don't think I'll ever see any sort of something like that happen again. Like the whole 10K project thing, the meta of that is dead in essence. So the next NFT bull run will be something completely different. But it was just amazing that that's what really set us up over the past year and a half. And who's to say that they can't continue building on top of that? And, you know, I heard from the talk that they did, they were saying now they're concentrating on really building epic things, which take time. So there's not going to be so many little things come in that pump prices. But when they do launch what they've been building, it should have a huge impact.
Yeah, I've said this to a few friends. My long-term plan is to get my ape back if all things go well. But I actually see a world where, and I think they actually mentioned this on a 100 Proof episode with Derek Edwards, who's in Flamingo DAO, and they were talking about essentially what projects that are built around utility, like apes at the moment, could potentially transition into just historically significant projects that don't even need to have any utility. And I think
like CryptoPunks.
Yeah, but I think Bored Apes eventually is going to get into that category, unless things go really, really sour or south for some reason. But you know, I see in 5-10 years time that apes are sort of, it's not going to be the same type of categorization as punks.
No, but there doesn't need to be a drop for them every year or some sort of utility. I agree.
I think they become like they become a desirable good just to say, I own a Bored Ape. And I think for a lot of people that got in the space, like me in 2021, that is honestly going to be a thing that I'll think about for many, probably decades to come. Like if I've got the loose chains,
your grandkids,
if I've got the loose chains at whatever time it is, and I can get an ape back in the wallet, I'll be doing it. And which is an interesting concept, right? I don't think I'm the only one that would be thinking like that. I think this is still so new, but I think in the coming decade, multiple decades. Just like you have desires to get maybe a watch or a car or whatever is important to you that you particularly like, I think this is going to become a thing.
Yeah, look, I have zero doubt that in a decade, the prices that we're talking are going to be massive. I have no idea what happens over the next 3 to 5 years, though. So it's always fun. I know I'll be holding, unless something drastic happens, like a crazy offer. And I guess we can quickly get on that point of there was a Gold Ape sale for 777 ETH, which was, I think, about 1.45 million US dollars. I'm in a Gold Ape chat. We were all telling him to go for 888 because he really wanted a quick sale. And he had it up for 5 hours. It got sold. That's fairly quickly, I would feel, for such a big price point. So he probably could have gone a bit higher. But the great thing is, as these golds get sold at a higher average price point, this is only good for me, of course. It means that we're slowly creeping towards that 1,000 ETH mark as an average buy-in. And people buying in at that expect 100% profit going forward. So I just need to hopefully hold on for another few years to reach that 2,000 ETH price point. But I know what I'll do at that stage. I'll have a 4,000 ETH price point before I ever sell by that stage. But really good to see.
I'm surprised you haven't been kicked out of this Gold Ape chat, given that you essentially called the top with your AFR article saying that you wouldn't sell for 5 million. You wanted 20, and ever since then it's been down only. So yeah.
But look, technically, so 5 million, I was getting offered 1,200 ETH at the time. The price today, well, yesterday, that sold fairly quickly, would be about 2 million Australian. So what are we down? 60% from that all-time high. And in the market where every other project is down 80, 90%, they've done quite well to hold up, even with me giving them the doom thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, so if anyone's out there and you've got a casual couple of thousand ETH, put in an offer to Steve's Ape.
And I'll probably say no.
All right, let's segue into your man, Mark Zuckerberg, and Facebook. You had a tweet last night, Steve. I believe it has cracked 1 million impressions. Tell the audience about it.
Yeah, last night I actually saw the image on another tweet, and then I went to the Facebook page of Mark Zuckerberg to make sure that he had really posted this. And we all know Meta. Last year, I'm sure a lot of us watched that video of Mark walking us through this amazing metaverse, and it just looked amazing. But the thing of what you really get and what you're sold, we got to see yesterday. So that video would have been all CGI, done by a proper gaming studio or a video studio, and that's their dream. So that's their Ready Player One utopia once they've finished the project. But they were selling that as if that's what's going to be launched. But then we saw this picture of Mark Zuckerberg with the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre behind him. It looks like clip art from the 80s. It just looks ridiculous. Anyway, so last night before bed, I decided to post it and just say, I looked up how much Meta spent on their metaverse play last year, which was $10 billion. I believe they were spending a similar sum this year. So let's say they've spent $15 billion, and this is the quality that they're putting out. I typed it up. Didn't think I would anything of it. I thought I'd get my usual 50 to 100 likes on a tweet like that. Went to bed, woke up, 6,900 likes. It's now over 8,000, near 9,000. And yeah, it ticked over 1.1 million impressions. My last biggest tweet, I was talking about Paris Hilton and my wife being impressed. The only time my wife's ever been impressed by the NFT space was when Paris Hilton followed me. That had 6,000 likes and I think 480,000 impressions. So this one's blown it out of the water. My first million impression tweet. So that's what happens when you take a week off Twitter, I guess. Twitter decides, oh, maybe this guy needs some engagement to stay on here. But look, if we go back to what they're actually launching, they're not doing anything wrong, because it's not, graphics can be improved very quickly. Getting the UI, UX and the back end and everything right is what's important in these metaverse plays. So they can always iterate on the graphics, and it's probably the easiest thing to improve. And we also know that graphics don't really matter. Look at Minecraft, look at Roblox. They're not pretty to look at, yet they've got massive audience. So I'm sure Facebook is trying to make this where it works on every device. It's a simple onboarding procedure, and it just works like Facebook. And if you go back to the original Facebook homepage, it was awful, but it's improved over time. Maybe it's gone backwards a bit in the last few years, but this is the exact same thing with any startup, and this is pretty much a startup for Metaverse. It's going to look ugly at the start. We have seen the other deeds land looking fantastic, but that is in such a compressed little world that you can make it look good for that little part. So I don't think it's the worst thing what they released, and I'm still thinking they will release something fairly decent with a lot of utility, and then they'll be able to improve over time. What did you think of the image?
Yeah, I mean, the image isn't overly sexy or attractive, or like it's not. It's sort of like it's not overly enticing. But I'm just still bullish on the fact that whether you like Facebook and Zuck and the whole ecosystem, and wherever you sit on that spectrum, I'm just very bullish still that as a founder CEO that is still in the space, that has done pretty big things from a technology standpoint with platforms that they're still playing in the space. I wouldn't underestimate what they will build, whether you like it or not, and whether that's your utopia of what the metaverse is going to be is a different thing. But
are you the target market for it as well?
I wouldn't be underestimating what they will deliver long term, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing when we think about our grandparents probably spend the most time on Facebook, and if they're getting some type of introduction to the metaverse to some degree, like it just helps everyone's cause moving towards digital asset ownership. Really is the way I like to think about it.
Exactly, and I think I saw a tweet, or might have been on the Milk Run email. It was showing how much had been invested by Fortune 500 companies in the last year. I can't remember if the number was 60 or $600 billion, but they're like, Google was the top investor in this space, but you don't hear anything about Google being in this space, but they know this is where the future is. So they're investing in all these companies building in the space. So like, I think it was 45% of Fortune 500 companies had made some type of investment in Web3/metaverse. So, these guys know how to invest their money. And yeah, it just shows that behind the scenes, just money is being absolutely pumped into this space.
100%. So let's touch a little bit on Proof and Moonbirds. I don't want to spend too much time. I know there's been a lot of stuff happening in the
every week. There's Moonbirds with Kevin talking, which it shows how good he is at sharing things. But just sometimes they don't get the best feedback. So I did see that he had a talk to Future Proof people today. So you would have been part of that. And there was a Grails 2 update as well. So let us know what he said, the general feedback, and what's happening there.
All right, let me see if I can keep this to sort of 60 to 90 seconds. So let's start with Grails 2. Grails 2 has started minting. There's only about 10% minted so far, but I actually sold my mint pass.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I decided not to participate in this one just for my personal circumstances at this stage. So there's 137 that have been minted for out of about 1,150, so only about 10%. There's still 5-6 days left until the minting window.
And in
ends.
this case, people are waiting right to the end to see
They are.
maybe more info, or if there's like a few that have only had 1 or 2 mints.
Yes. So Grail number 10, which is a very loud piece, it looks like it could be maybe a Beeple piece, but it's sort of animated. I'm not sure. That has been minted 13 times. That's the sort of clubhouse leader at the moment. The future proof stuff. So there's a big announcement. Obviously, Proof have had some communication issues. They've been sort of dragged over the hot coals with the CCO drama and sort of the oddities a couple of weeks before that,
which no one talks about now.
Yes. So there is some news with oddities though. So I'm about halfway through the update that Kevin and Justin provided to all Proof, Moonbirds and Oddity holders overnight. It happened at about 3 a.m. this morning. So I'm listening to the recording. But the key takeaways, I would say the overall sentiment is they've course corrected very well, at least for now, in sort of their communication. They're going to be having some big announcements on the 30th of this month of August, which will actually be the 31st for us if you're listening in Australia. Oddities will have a burn mechanism. So there is going to be, I don't know whether it's going to be Ravens or not, but there is and this is probably the only part that I'm a little bit suspect on hearing, because I don't know if now is the time to extend the collection of the Proof ecosystem even further. But Kevin's words were, this is not going to be the standard extension of a collection. I think it's going to be something like,
can you add a trait to your Moonbird or take one off?
Well, he keeps saying Moonbirds 2 on this recording, so I can't tell you what that's necessarily going to mean. But for oddity holders, there was a big rush or a big sweep of oddities this morning. I think the floor was around 0.7, 0.75. It got up to about 1.3 at about 9 a.m. our time this morning when I checked it. I think it's whittled back down to about 1.
About 1, yeah.
Yeah.
The good thing there, and from an outside perspective, is that, and I think they mentioned this, there was no one front running. So they managed to keep it in-house and managed to keep all their employees from either telling anyone or buying, knowing this news would spike those oddities.
Which is a pretty remarkable achievement.
I don't think it's ever been done in the States, which is poor, but yeah.
Yeah, so, as a Proof Collective member and still heavily invested in Team Kevin, I think they've got some points back on the board in the last sort of 24 hours. But, I would just say sort of we'll probably do a deeper dive into the actual announcements in the episode following Future Proof, Steve. But for the first Future Proof that they had back in March, I think it was this year, essentially Kevin likes to lay out what they're going to be working on for the next 6 months. And High Rise, which is sort of their code word for the quote-unquote metaverse they're building, is a lot of the plans for High Rise are going to be revealed on the 30th of August. And some of the things that he spoke about on the call today were actually having some analytics and some visualizing a lot of data that is not currently visualized really anywhere, in terms of like who has actually held on to this PFP or this particular Beeple or this particular Chromie Squiggle. Like, was it Jimmy McNeilis that minted it? Like, is there some sort of famous...
So provenance times users in the space.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that Proof Collective skews more on the art market side of things. So I think you'll see some innovative ideas around, putting artists up in the spotlight and actually telling a story behind the art too. I even heard that there's going to be potential narrators and telling the story, like from a voice context of, if you were to stumble upon a Tyler Hobbs, how this actual Tyler Hobbs Fidenza came about.
How do you think that gives value to Moonbirds and proof holders?
Yeah, so it's from my understanding, again, I'm only halfway through this and they didn't really reveal everything. It's going to be a token gated community, at least I think in the beginning. So I think depending on what tier in the proof ecosystem, whether you're at proof collective tier or Moonbirds or oddities, you're going to have sort of scaled up and scaled down benefits. But it's hard to know what the floor is going to do. I think in this market, it's almost near impossible unless you announce like token coming, and to like the sort of ApeCoin style.
In essence, proof passes did get token come in when he said, I believe he said something like there's going to be 10 airdrops for proof holders the rest of the year.
That they will be so the example there would be HeartU, which is an artist that was famous on Tezos and made the transition to Ethereum. It's one of my favorite NFTs in my whole collection, my moat. There was a special HeartU drop.
That's your PFP.
Yeah, that was my PFP for a while. That particular drop was done in January when Kevin had more time on his hands and he was facilitating these things. So that thing around the 10 drops, it's going to be a combination of Grails drops, which I think there's going to be 3 of those a year. And then the other ones will be more of those HeartU type collaborations.
So new artists with 1,000 time drop.
Yeah, and it doesn't, well, it might not always be 1,000. It could be 100, and then Proof Collective members, you'd have a 10% chance of getting that piece. So I think it's going to be a combination of mechanisms there. But yeah, look, it's always, I've mentioned this on the show before. It's very difficult, I think, as a project founder when you launch something and you've got someone that purchased at Mint, and I could never say that I haven't had a great return from my proof pass, right? I bought it really for a Discord and to get into Kevin's inner circle. I wanted to be with elite NFT collectors and artists and minds, and tick, 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 that all happened. And all this new stuff, like we didn't even know Moonbirds was coming.
It's all gravy.
But if you bought a proof pass for 100 ETH in April, and potentially if you didn't get the 2 free Moonbirds as well, your expectations versus my expectations are very, very different. And I've never been able to reconcile that in my mind in terms of like the pressure that comes with that and misaligned incentives around that too. So I think it's still one that I grapple with.
Yeah. My question is, so you've held your Moonbirds and they had gone up to 40 odd ETH. They're now back at 12 ETH.
Thanks for that. How have you
felt? Oh, look, we're all part of it. I believe Bored Apes got to 150 ETH floor and now it's 78 or something like that.
I saw that one too. Kick me again.
What else have you got in your wallet? Let me just check. No, but so how have you felt holding them all this way down? Have you held them?
No, I have. I have. I don't think anyone likes to see the floor drop, but nesting, Kevin and particularly, I think there'll be a proof token that comes eventually.
Do you have your bum bag first?
I don't have my fanny pack yet. I've got my caps. I haven't got my socks yet, but I think nesting longer term will. One of the things before Moonbirds launched, Kevin kept saying was he found that it was odd that someone like you, Steve, that had minted a Bored Ape and kept it the whole time, got the same amount of ApeCoin versus someone that
was disappointing.
Bought. Yeah, so you as a holder thought that was disappointing. My play with my Moonbirds holding those longer term is I'm hoping that there will be decent size rewards when that eventually happens. But look, I made arguably, the wrong call. You make these calls in the heat of the moment. Maybe the play, probably more the sensible play would have been me back in June when I was, felt like the world was very, very shaky underneath, and I hadn't experienced a crypto downturn like this. The velocity of it happening was very difficult. It was happening while I was overseas as well, which added complexity of just having that bandwidth and not being in natural environment. And I decided to part way with my ape because it was the biggest chip on the table. And, had I parted with a moonbird or even two moonbirds, I might not have got the same return as the ape. But I've got to say too, the cost basis for my moonbirds was zero, right? Yeah. And also tax considerations. I know it's not a sexy thing to talk about. You had held it
for a year. Yep.
And I had held my ape for a year. So, those things did creep into my mind, but, being diversified, and I love the ape, ecosystem, I would have loved to hold on to my ape and maybe parted way with a moonbird or two, but I brought into a lot of other factors and I made a decision and I live with that decision. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back, I believe you sold it for higher than the floor is now. So you could always come back in. But yeah, tax considerations and all of that make it very complex.
Yeah, and also I converted all of it to USDC at the time and then watched ETH run up. Then watched
it went up.
Yeah, at the time I sold my ape, ETH was at about 1,700 AUD and it's at about 2,700 AUD. So what we would call that is wrecked.
At least you can claim a loss somewhere.
No, it was certainly not a loss. I still did very, very well out of that, but it's very hard to detach from all-time highs, isn't it? Like the psychology. I am
100%.
I am reading the book The Psychology of Money right now, and it's
by
just
Morgan Housel.
Yes, yeah. It's just it's fascinating how we think. We're getting a little bit off track here, but we think, finances and investing is so rational and spreadsheets, but really it's all psychology. And I would say that I'm not too proud to say, I think I got shook out, right? In that June, for 4 straight weeks, I couldn't stop looking at the price of ETH. And with my own personal situation, had I been in a job that was, giving a steady income, I would have kept it, right? But that wasn't my situation at the time. And I thought for me, I wanted to stick around in this space for a little bit longer, and selling one quote unquote JPEG was going to give me enough runway and, more importantly, bandwidth to do other things in this space, build out my consultancy, start things like this podcast with you, Steve, keep running NFT Fest. So, that was the decision I made. But I had a few friends that sort of said, oh, maybe hold on. And I was trying to get to 1st of July as well. But I went down the doom scrolling and I was listening to emergency pods on Bankless and saying, ETH's going to 500. And I thought, I got to sell. So, we make our decisions.
Exactly. But that's where we're different. At the start of this podcast, you're positive at the moment. I think we're teetering on even Moonbirds at 12. There's that psychological number of 10. If it gets near there and goes down, we've seen it with Doodles, Clone X, I think Azuki, and a few others. But yeah, you just don't know. That's why for me, it's easier. Anything I ever buy, invest in, I assume I've lost it all. And I assume that I'm not going to sell for 10 years. So it's much easier to not think about it. I don't think I've sold. But my hope from the start of the year, I kept saying I'm a seller this year. And I did sell some from January, February, March. But recently I thought there's more potential upside long-term than downside. So now I haven't been doing anything. The occasional mint of very rare projects. But yeah, I'm just holding. I still think we've got a year, 6 months at least, if not a year, before any sort of movement happens. And there's no, you can just wait until you see a proper correction. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, well, I think I've sort of made my move now, and I'm just sort of sitting with my current collection. And, I've still got a few art pieces like the protoglyph that I think will be quite good long term.
You're going to be fine.
Yeah, there's 77 of them in the world, and there's already a few diamond hands in that collection. So as autoglyphs becomes more and more famous, it's 512 autoglyphs. There's 77 protoglyphs.
Yep.
I'm not saying that
you're going to have 512 holders of those autoglyphs probably wanting one of those as well.
I hope so. And I also own protoglyph.eth, so I was very cagey and minted that.
That's
anyway.
Quite,
this is our new segment called Greg Pumps His Bags.
All right, let's move on. We'll try to get through the last little bit in 10 minutes. Well, we can quickly go over this because I don't think me and you care all that much. Punks and Meebits IP license released. I didn't really look into it, but is it the same as the Bored Ape license?
Pretty much. I had a quick look in on the Twitter thread the other day. They are mentioning, I think, a few things now, like you can't use it for hate speech or hate crimes and things like that. So they're sort of putting a few caveats in there that I'm not sure if they were in there previously with the Bored Ape license. But yeah, it's very, very similar to the Bored Ape IP license that really the apes sort of made famous to a degree. I must say though, we sort of all talk about Bored Apes being the first one to do that license, and I even thought there was a project I remember I minted last year called Deadheads, and I actually thought Deadheads had got in before Bored Apes, but I was listening to a great roundtable podcast on CCO versus IP with like Jimmy McNeilis. He's obviously a Gold Ape holder too, but Jimmy was saying that was on overpriced JPEGs with Carly Riley. Jimmy was saying that Avastars actually put in a very similar I think licensing agreement, and Avastars was a 2020 project. So
I remember that project.
I think Avastars, not financial advice here obviously, but Avastars to me is probably maybe a sneaky one long term where it might sit somewhere in the historical realms, just given that it was, I think you could make the argument that it was the first PFP project that was fully on chain, from my understanding with Jimmy.
I remember the website, and you could go to the website and just keep generating unlimited amounts of them until you found one that was either rare or that you liked, and then you could mint it. It was very interesting. I remember I was on the site. I was very close a number of times to minting one, and then never did. But I've seen a few pumps for it over the past couple of years, but I have no idea what it's at the moment or what's happening with it.
I've got one. I got a free one as a VFriend holder actually last year, and I think the floor's around 0.06 or 0.07. It occasionally has run-ups to like 0.15, 0.2, and then it'll sort of retrace, but it's a supply.
It's a large collection.
25,000, yeah. Okay. So, but anyway, I digress. Let's give a quick shout out to PUMA. PUMA made an announcement the other day. I entered a pre-mint via Moonbirds and Proof. I'm sure that there was many other projects that had the ability to enter pre-mints too. This is where it gets a little confusing. So you can enter the pre-mint to get chosen to get a nitro token. And if you get chosen to have a nitro token, you can get that for free, but then that enables you to mint a nitro pass, which I believe is going to be for 0.2 ETH. So a very weird dynamic there. So you get something for free that gives you the ability to mint something that costs, which just seems
it's like a mint
weird.
pass.
Yeah. So you get a free mint pass to have the privilege in a bear market to pay 0.2 ETH.
And will this be Puma gear? Is it a physical and digital, or my favorite word, fidgetal?
Oh, don't say that. I'm not in the fidgetal camp.
It's a terrible word.
It's a terrible name. From when I had a look the other day, I joined their Discord. It looks like it's going to be, that playbook really of Adidas, the Adidas into the metaverse one. There's going to be some gear. They've been quite vague with it so far. There'll be some perks. But look, again, brands like this coming into the space, playing around, I'll never knock it. You can only sort of just judge it on what they're going to deliver for the actual price, and hopefully they've got enough value in this type of market to warrant a 0.2 ETH mint, which I still think is reasonably high in this market.
Yeah, and talking about big companies, I guess AFL Mint, they had their mint this week. Now, for the non-Australians, AFL is our biggest sport. You could compare it to aerial ping pong, but there are a lot of fans in Australia of the sport, and this was a very hyped, I guess. There was a lot of people that I know that were really keen on it. They launched their allow list, so anyone that was on the email list from the start was on the allow list. There was 3,600 packs of cards. Now, AFL, this project of theirs is just following the NBA Top Shot. So you get a pack, you opened it, it's got moments. And yeah, I ended up buying 4. First, congrats on the sellout. They sold out in 12 hours. So well done there. There was a definite want for these. I think they got the pricing right. So it was 49 Australian dollars plus whatever extra, ended up being 53 Australian dollars per pack. And you got 3 of these cards. I ended up buying 4 packs. I was hoping for a Genesis ball because I think that's the one with utility. There was a 10% chance of getting those. But yeah, what were your thoughts? And then I'll talk about the actual onboarding process. So the things they got right were it sold out, and I think pricing. There was a lot to dislike. But yeah, let's hear your thoughts about the AFL Mint, and then I'll come back to my experience with it.
So I missed out. I had intentions of buying a couple of packs. I went through the registration process, which was very similar to the other side land, where you had to KYC, which is sort of got aspects of what Animoca deliver with previous projects. Blockto wallet. I have used Blockto before for a different mint on Flow. I've minted twice on Flow before. One was UFC. I'm going to loop back on UFC Strike in a minute, Steve. But the other one was actually Place, which is an Australian project run by Lana Hopkins, who I know. So I was familiar with Blockto. I got to say, I find it personally pretty clunky. Obviously, you and I are probably more... I don't know if we would consider ourselves maxis, but we just play where most of the people play in the NFT space, which is on Ethereum on layer 1 currently. So I found it quite clunky using it previously, but I was able to navigate my way through the AFL process probably easier than I would have had I not had experience with Blockto before. But, I think, this sort of top shot model that most sports are following. It's very similar what the AFL has done to Top Shot, but I do think that they've got extended plans, for their particular product with AFL Mint. They sort of were big on this thing called AFL ID. But to me, as a traditional NFT collector, well, when I say traditional, on Ethereum, I find that once back to my UFC story, when I minted UFC Strike earlier this year, I think it was, that was the first Flow project that I'd got involved with, which was quite interesting to me because Top Shot was a big unlock for me with NFTs because I realized it was my basketball collecting cards days as a kid, reincarnated but digitally. But I don't know. For me right now, collectible cards are not sort of what I'm personally interested in, but I did want to dabble with the UFC. UFC sort of had a hiccup with their drop. I got an email from them saying, essentially, here's your money refunded. You get to keep your cards, and we're giving you additional free packs. But I've never looked at them since, honestly. I have not looked. So I think it was in January. I have not gone back into that wallet. I don't even know where my login credentials are. They're probably somewhere. AFL, I sort of missed the boat. I had a few personal commitments on yesterday. I was going to mint some this morning, and they sold out. So congratulations to the AFL. But I think it's just sort of one of these things where when you say NFTs to people, some people think of, I suppose there's a spectrum of where people think what NFTs are, right? A lot of people think they're just your current intellectual property as a sport or a musician, and you turn them digitally, and that's an NFT. But you and I probably know that there are a lot more different use cases. But I applaud the AFL for getting involved. I don't think it's an easy space to still jump into, particularly in this market where I'm sure on platforms, especially like Instagram and Facebook, when they were promoting their AFL Mint product, they probably got hammered from a sentiment perspective. But good on them for sort of staying the course and putting a product out into the world.
Yeah, I actually feel bad for the sporting organisations because they don't know enough about the space, so they have to rely on third parties. And Emoco is one of these that seems to work with all these companies. It's hard for me when I see something on Flow or some other thing that's like, let's say Solana or something like that. I feel these sporting organizations have been a bit gypped, and that the company that they're working with is getting a kickback from whatever blockchain they're working with. So my experience was, look, I wanted to support the AFL because, as you said, amazing that they've decided to come into this space. So I went, set up my Blockter wallet. That was fine. Had to download the app, got my Flow blockchain address. Then every time you log into the AFL Mint site, you need to receive an email that has a number that you put in. So this is their security, even though you got the username and password and your wallet. Then to pay, I had to set up a MoonPay account, which required KYC myself. This was the first stumbling block. So I actually went away. I thought, well, I can't be bothered enough. Half an hour later, I'm like, no, I really want to own one of these first AFL packs. I don't think they're going to be worth anything, but the historical thing of it is cool. I want to support the AFL. KYC, the MoonPay. And look, it doesn't take long once you send your license in, you take your selfie and so on. It's a bit of a hassle. You got to use your mobile, can't use desktop, all that sort of stuff. Fine. Did that, went to pay. CBA, ANZ, a few other Australian banks do not accept payments from MoonPay or debits, so you can't use those. I had to use one of these online banks, neobanks, and that worked. But then the page that eventually says you have paid was a broken page from MoonPay. Didn't know what to do while waiting for that. Ended up having to close that page, and then no cards were in my little area. So then I sat and waited for about 10, 15 minutes and found the contact details on AFL Mint, sent an email in, didn't get a reply for a while, came back to the site, eventually saw that my pack of cards was there, and then opened it up and that was fine. Same sort of experience as NBA Top Shot. You click, you open them, you sign a transaction, and that was fine. I ended up buying 3 more packs, the exact same issue each time. And then I received an email saying, well, if you don't KYC yourself with us, which is AFL Mint, we're going to close your account in 30 days. So that was a bit of a pain in the ass again. But of course, I don't want to lose these NFTs. So I had to KYC again with a separate company. So my ID's all over the shop at the moment. But like you, I probably won't come back to the site again. I've got now 12 AFL NFTs. I barely looked at them, to be honest. And yeah, so it's a difficult one. And I had a couple of friends that I had tried to get into it, and they just gave up. So they had the allow list. And in saying that, you can still buy some because they're going to open up to everyone else, I think in the next week or so. But a lot of my friends, not one of my friends who I sent to go buy some packs, ended up buying packs just because it was too hard an onboarding process. So yeah, personally, I think an ETH or even an ETH layer 2 would have been easier to onboard people, but it's the way it is. They did sell out, so the demand's there. It'll just be interesting to see what they do going forward now.
Yeah, again, I think both of us agree. You know, kudos to the AFL for doing what they've done so far. I think we're just in this moment of time too, Steve. Like, you know, I've been in boardrooms in many sporting organisations, not just the ones that I've worked for, and particularly after all the drama of the last few months with, you know, the Luna, the Celsius stuff, the scams, all the stuff that, you know, you and I sort of see the good side of this space, but it does make the front page, and there's reluctancy still to, you know, even echo the word cryptocurrency. So I'm sure that these type of considerations for sports are still, yes, there's probably some financial incentives tied in there as well. But when you're talking about, I believe that, you know, there's huge upside to onboarding people into owning true decentralized digital assets. Like the fact that I know I can sort of move country to country and have, you know, just got to know my 12 words or 24 words, and I can unlock, you know, all my digital assets, NFTs, crypto, etc. You know, this experience is probably more of a Web 2.5 experience that we've encountered with the Blockto wallet. And, you know, it's not the true experience that you and I have encountered, but I have deep empathy for people in these decision-making roles when, if they were to say, well, we've got to tell our AFL fans and supporters that they're going to have to, you know, essentially KYC with a cryptocurrency exchange, then they're going to have to get some Ethereum, which is, you know, a cryptocurrency, which might be on the nose at the moment for many board members that don't, you know, quite get the space at the moment. Then they're going to move their crypto to a MetaMask, and that's where a lot of the scams happen. So it's sort of like, it's, in a way, it's a little bit of a lose-lose situation, I think, for these sports at the moment. Like, I think both you and I would like to see the sports moving forwards go in that more true sort of decentralized fashion, and sort of where really the culture and where the NFT action actually is. But I fully understand
they're not locked in. You hope that they can still see later on that they might move from Flow to ETH or something like that.
Yeah. So, you know, again, it's a net positive for the space. And I think no doubt the AFL is probably thinking about, you know, yes, we would like people like Steve and Greg and all those sort of degens that have an interest in AFL or sport to sort of come on the ride with us and, you know, go through this a bit of annoying process with Blockto, etc. But our sort of key goal is to try to onboard many AFL fans like Top Shot did, really. So, you know, if they bring a few more thousand or tens of thousands, or maybe even, you know, who knows, in a few years, a couple of 100,000, I mean, that's going to be a big win for, again, digital asset ownership. We just know that there's probably a bit of a scale of what digital asset ownership looks like, but for most people, they're probably not going to care too much that you know, it's in a little bit more of a Web 2.5 model than sort of what we're accustomed to on Ethereum.
100%. All right, we do have another topic, but I think we can save it to closer to the merge. We're going to talk about, maybe next week, we'll talk about what are we thinking about NFTs that were minted before the merge? And the fact is that you're going to have two separate exact same NFTs, one on if proof of work is still running, and one on proof of stake. So a really interesting topic that we probably want to spend a bit of time on. And will these old ones, let's say proof of stake, proof of work sticks around, will people want those and see them as the historical ones over proof of stake? So a really interesting conversation we'll leave for next week. But yeah, we're over our time limit this week. So thank you all for joining in. Thank you, Greg, for the chat once again. Always fun. And yeah, we will speak to you all next week.
See you later.